So many of you have asked me about living and working in Japan and the types of visas that allow you to do that, but I thought I would cover the most popular ones, or at least the ones that I've had direct experience with, which is the working holiday visa, the student visa, or the working visa, the Humanities Visa. The visa that I am currently on is the working holiday visa. If there is a working holiday visa scheme in your country, then Japan has had some kind of a partnership with your country that focuses on cultural exchange and experience. So that is what it is for. It is not primarily for work. You can work on it, but it is there to deepen your understanding and love for Japan. So if you are in any of these countries here, then that means you can get a working holiday visa. But you have to be aged between 18 and 30, or in some cases 18 to 25 inclusive. And when it says inclusive, it means you can be 30 years old and still apply for that particular visa. So normally the working holiday visa lasts 12 months from the date of arrival in Japan, so you have it for 1 year. But if you're a citizen of Canada, Australia or New Zealand, your initial visa will only be issued for 6 months, and if you want to stay for longer than 6 months, before it runs out you have to get it extended. So your first time visa will only be 6 months, whereas all the other countries is 12 months straight away. But aside from that, the only real difference is the amount of money that you will have to have for your working holiday visa application. So the Japanese embassy in every single country asks for you to have savings in your bank account. Now, before I go ahead with this, I just want to say that the number that they give you, so let's say for the UK they say you need to have £2,500 saved up to live comfortably, or at least to survive in Japan until you get your first job to help you with the working holiday visa activities. So if you are saving up money and you only save up £2,500 and you think that that will last you, it will not. Japan is an expensive place. Even if you eat at the cheapest restaurants or buy the cheapest discount food or find the cheapest share house to live in, it will still not be enough money for you to go ahead with. By the time you get all your documentation and your Japanese bank account card, you will be out of money and it will be very, very stressful. So just make sure you have extra safety nets. I was very lucky because my parents were willing to help me out. We had a conversation before I left that if should anything go wrong, they would help me. But if you are here by yourself and nobody is helping you, just make sure you save up enough money, because there is nothing scarier than being in a foreign country without having enough money. And I have seen it. I have seen people come here and not have enough money, and it is a very, very stressful situation. So money will kind of be a running theme with a lot of the visas. Even if you are on a full sponsored humanities visa, you still need to have money saved up, because at the end of the day it is a safety net and you will definitely need it if you are in a foreign country. So I'm gonna get back to talking to you about the documentation and everything else that you need for the working holiday visa. So the first thing that they're asking for is a valid UK passport or a passport from your country if your country is participating in the working holiday visa scheme. So number 2 is the visa application form, and this is the thing that really stressed me out for some reason. I don't know why, but it genuinely did. But honestly, it's pretty straightforward. You just have to write down all your information onto it. Where it says purpose of visit to Japan, I just wrote working holiday. Intended length of stay in Japan, there I wrote 1 year, because that is how long I can stay in Japan for on my visa. Date of arrival in Japan and port of entry into Japan. I would strongly recommend having your tickets already purchased to Japan and your return ticket, just because it shows that the amount of money that you have in your bank account when you provide proof of your funds, none of that will go toward your tickets. That is solely for your living expenses. It kind of proves that you are not wishing to outstay your 1 year stay in Japan on this particular visa. Of course, this is not necessary for every single country, but I have noticed that on some countries' embassy pages, it is strongly recommended that you have your outbound ticket and your return ticket as well. So the port of entry into Japan will be the airport that you're flying into. Name and addresses of hotels or persons with whom applicant intends to stay. So I actually had my accommodation sorted before I arrived in Japan, and I will leave links down below for some of the companies that you might consider going with if you would like to plan your accommodation before you arrive in Japan. But what I did is I actually went with Airbnb, and I am not talking about renting renting an apartment on Airbnb because that would be insanely expensive. Recently, more and more Japanese sharehouse companies have started to put up their properties onto Airbnb, and that is how I found my first sharehouse. And the best thing is that the prices on Airbnb were exactly the same as the prices would be if you have rented from Japan, and that's really good in my opinion, because a lot of the times if something goes on Airbnb they charge you more, but in this case there wasn't. The best thing is that from if you book from Airbnb, you will pay from your country's card as opposed to from your Japanese card, because it will take a while for your Japanese card to come in. So let's move on. Where it says guarantor or reference in Japan, you can leave that blank if nobody is inviting you to Japan. This guarantor or reference bit is more for somebody who's going to Japan for work on a different visa. Don't get put off by this, because the visa application form from the UK is actually used for a variety of different visas, not just a working holiday visa. This is just a standard visa application form that they use for working visas and working holiday visas and humanities visas and all kinds of visas. So this is not solely for working holiday visa. That's why there are questions on here which they kind of expect you to leave blank, so do not worry about that. The next thing is the passport size photograph, which you will stick onto the application form. Please don't staple it, because that will invalidate the whole form. It sounds silly, but it's just what they're asking for. The next thing they ask for is your CV, so basically your work experience, and this was quite easy, but I just want to say be careful writing down any questionable activities that you did. Like if you worked in a strip bar or something, maybe don't put that down, because it won't look very good to the embassy. Try and put down nice, well-rounded jobs that you did, where you have had good connections with people, and should they contact them for a reference, you know, the people will give you a good reference. So don't put down anything questionable, especially for the working holiday visa, just because on the working holiday visa you can pretty much get any job you want. It's a very good visa to have. However, the only jobs you would not be allowed to do on a working holiday visa would be jobs that are deemed to affect public morals, such as bars or host clubs or gambling parlors, something that is not good for society. So if you have ever done like any kind of questionable jobs, maybe don't disclose that. It's not really lying, it's just building the best version of yourself. Okay, so number 5 and number 6 were the things that really gave me a headache, because they were outline of intended activities and a written reason for applying for a working holiday visa, typed on A4 paper. So outline of intended activities is basically your itinerary for the time that you intend to spend in Japan. So for me, for example, I had to provide a year's worth of plans of what I wanted to do while I lived in Japan. And honestly, I looked around online for examples and everybody provided different examples. So what I'm going to do now is just show you what I did, basically. And I wrote out my plans in a way that go 2 months at a time. So August, September, October, November. And for each paragraph, I basically wrote what I was planning to do. With this, what you basically have to demonstrate is that you know what you're doing, you have a plan. You're not going to be working the entire time you are here, because if you are literally just doing nothing but working while in Japan, you should be on a different visa, like the Humanities Visa, for example. And also it is to prove that you have enough funds to sustain yourself. This is also a good way for them to tell if you have a job lined up before you arrive here, or what kind of work you're planning to participate in while you're in Japan. There's absolutely nothing wrong with saying that you do plan to find work while you're out here to support yourself. I did, and it did not affect me in the slightest. I tried to stick to my itinerary and it's doing quite well. You obviously don't have to stick to it once you arrive here, because plans change, but this is just a way to demonstrate to them that you have done your research, you have enough funds, and you're not coming to Japan just to work. Next is the written reason for applying for a working holiday visa, typed on A4 paper. And I did not know how passionate I wanted to go with this one, but I wrote just over half a page of why I wanted to come to Japan. So for the written reason, I basically told them how I discovered Japan. So I wrote about Sailor Moon. I wrote about how I am super interested in Japanese food, especially like fresh Japanese produce. I went off on like a tangent. I went like really far into like the deep end here. I talked about radishes. I talked about how I wanted to see Kyoto and why I wanted to see it. I talked about onsens and how it was my dream to finally experience an onsen. And I was just super honest. I think what they want to know is that you will come to Japan and truly immerse yourself in the culture, and you will learn something new. And that is basically it for the documentation that you need to provide yourself. Now, the last thing is the funds. The actual funds are different for every single country, but of course this is just an outline. For example, in the UK you need to have 2,500 in cleared funds or 1,500 in cleared funds, along with the appropriate evidence that the applicant is in possession of a ticket out to Japan and a return ticket as well. But what the embassy is asking is for you to provide 3 months worth of bank statements showing the cleared funds. You do not have to have that 2,500 in your bank the entirety of the 3-month period. The reason they ask you for that 3 months bank statement is because they want to know where the money is coming from. So if the money is coming from your work, or if it's coming from a loan. If it is coming from a loan or somebody who you will owe the money back to, your application will be denied. The only reason they ask for 3 months worth of statements is so that you can prove that the money is 100% yours. Also, another thing to note is just to make sure that there are no really big strange transactions happening. But if there's a recurring payment that's really high and it regularly wipes all your money, then chances are they will question that. So try to have as close as you can to the requested amount at all times, and definitely when you present your bank statement, like the final number at the top, when you go to the embassy and give it to them, make sure it is way above the requested amount. Not only to appease the embassy, but also to help yourself when you arrive here, because like I said, the amount of money that they're asking you to have is not enough. Another tip I want to mention is that if your parents put in any money to help you out for the working holiday visa, or a big lump sum of money goes into your account, and like for example, my parents gave me a gift before I went to Japan. They gave me some money, and just to prove to the embassy that I did not take that money as a loan, or that it wasn't a questionable transaction, I had my mum write them a letter and put her contact details at the bottom stating that that money was a gift, and should there be any problem, to please contact her. So this is something just to keep in mind in case your parents are helping you out. Okay, so the next visa option is the student visa, and it is something I briefly considered because student visas are very easy to get, in my personal opinion. They are definitely the easiest one of all the visas, and that is because the school kind of does a lot of the work for you. Of course, this does depend on the school, but in my personal opinion, they're just a little bit easier to obtain, especially because they are not limited to a specific set of countries. Most people can apply for a student visa in Japan, but the clause is that it is unbelievably expensive. Crazy expensive, like so expensive. So not every student visa is created equal in Japan. Some student visas are for the university students, and they're like the top tier student visa. They are the best student visas. I believe on them you can stay for 4.5 years, so 4.5 years. They are the most powerful student visa you can get. And then there are the language school student visas, and they only allow you to stay in Japan for 2 years. In order for you to have your student visa valid for the entirety of your stay, you absolutely must be enrolled in an educational institution for the entirety of the time. So if you think that you're just gonna like, no, I don't want to learn anymore, I plan to do something else, you can't do that because your visa will not be valid. Because your school is technically vouching for you, they are acting as a guarantor of sorts. You will come to Japan and you will do this one task that you said you will do, which is learn either Japanese or something else. So for the university type of student visa, you have to apply directly to the university itself. I'm not going to go too deeply into that. It is something you can do after school. It's pretty similar to applying to be an international student in a UK university. I worked in a UK university for a while, and the process is very similar. So apply directly to the university and they help you with a lot of the paperwork. The language school route is a little bit more common because not everybody wants to do a degree, not everyone wants to go to university for 4 years. You might just want to come to Japan for 2 years and explore Japan while learning Japanese. And also one of the reasons you might be wanting to come here is to learn the language. And the best way to learn the language is to study it in Japan in a language school. So there are many Japanese language schools available in Tokyo alone. There are all over the country, but Tokyo is a very popular place for them. And each one of them offers a different learning style. So if you are thinking about applying for a student visa and coming here and learning the language in a language school, I strongly recommend paying close attention to the way that they teach and making sure that you are satisfied with the pace that they teach at, and just really research the school, because to be tied in for that for long term and paying a lot of money for it, it really needs to be the right decision. So in order for you to be eligible for a student visa, you need to be studying something in Japan for more than 3 months. So this means that you can enroll in a language school in Japan for 6 months and receive a student visa then. And what normally happens is that you gather all your paperwork, and your paperwork is everything from photocopies of your passport to passport photographs, your CV, certificates of your qualifications, so your GCSEs or A-levels, so all the certificates from your education. You need to prove to them that you have actually finished school, and then you send it all off to the school of your choice. And what they do then is that they apply to the Japanese embassy to provide you with a certificate of eligibility. And once they receive the certificate of eligibility, they send it to you along with the acceptance letter, and you take the acceptance letter and the certificate of eligibility and you take it to your embassy, well, to your Japanese embassy in your country, and you fill out the visa application form, and then you will get accepted. But the main thing in this is that the school will provide you with a certificate of eligibility, and that is a very, very important document along with the acceptance letter. Also, a little tip: when you go to get your student visa from the Japanese embassy in your country, make sure they give you your certificate of eligibility back, because you will need that once you arrive in Japan. When you get your residency permit and your residency card and everything else, you have to provide them with that certificate of eligibility. So it is very, very important. But this is pretty much it on how to get your student visa. You will have to fill out a small section for your school explaining why you want to study in Japan, and they will provide that to the Japanese embassy. Again, it's just like the working holiday visa, where you explain your reasons for wanting to come to Japan. You have to be honest, and you have to be passionate about the Japanese language and Japanese culture and learning more about Japanese culture, and just put a lot of effort into your reasons, and then you shouldn't be denied. And also, I just wanted to quickly mention that you can work on the student visa, but your hours are very, very limited. So you will only be able to do limited part-time work. But yeah, you can work, but just not as many hours as the other visas. But the school will make it very clear to you on what you want to include, and overall the process is very, very easy. It just takes a long time. There is a lot of waiting around while your paperwork gets to the embassy in Japan and then gets back to you, and then you go to the embassy in your country. It's just a very long, drawn out process, but itself, it's not as difficult as some of the other visas out there. And then we have the working visas, or the visas that fall under the umbrellas of work. So initially, before I came to Japan, I actually applied for a job in Japan, and I got the job in Japan, and I needed to get a humanities visa, and it works kind of similar to the student visa, where the company will sponsor your visa for you. They will get in touch with the embassy for you, and the embassy will send you the certificate of eligibility. Like, again, that paper is really, really important. But the reason I didn't go for it is because the company contract was so restricting in terms of hours that I would not come to Japan for the thing that I wanted to come to Japan for, which is to explore Japan. I would literally have no time to do anything else aside from work. So I felt like the only way for me to come and explore Japan would be on a working holiday visa. And also, the working holiday visa is something that you can have once in your life, just once in your life, and I didn't want to miss that opportunity. I feel like it's a little bit early for me to settle down into such extreme work, maybe in the future, but not at the moment. I want to explore right now and just see where life takes me. But it works the same for the majority of working visas. What you do is you apply for a job that is advertised in your country but is placed in Japan, and normally what the company does is they take all your information, they take your application, and they send it off to the embassy in Japan to get the eligibility certificate, and then they send the eligibility certificate to you, and then you apply for the visa in your own country with the sponsorship from the company. And you do need to find this particular job while you are still in your own country. This is a little bit odd to me because there are so many companies in Japan that are currently hiring people who are on a working holiday visa or on a student visa, and they are willing to sponsor a full working visa with the condition that you are applying from Japan. So what they're doing is they're targeting those people who are on a working holiday visa or a student visa, and they want to stay in Japan for long term. And it's not illegal to change a visa or anything, it's just something that historically has been quite difficult to do. There's a lot of paperwork, and your company has to be really good at pushing your cause. But it is something that I've noticed, and I feel like it's becoming more and more common in Japan. These visas normally require you to have a degree. You do not need a degree for a working holiday visa or a student visa, but for the working visas, especially the Humanities Visa, you have to prove to the embassy, to Japan, that you are a specialist at something or that particular job needs you, and you have to have a degree. In fact, I haven't come across a single person that does not have a degree who went for that visa, and I know that's so discouraging to a lot of people because not everybody has a degree, but the only other way to get a job in Japan or to arrive in Japan on a student visa or a working holiday visa and get a job then is to learn Japanese. If you learn Japanese to a moderate level, you will have so much more opportunity in Japan. So even if you do not have a degree, you still have a chance as long as you do know Japanese. But working visas require you to have a degree, and they require you to have a company that will sponsor you most of the time. I'm not going to get into the self-sponsored visa. A self-sponsored visa basically requires you to prove to the Japanese embassy that you make enough money to sustain yourself. I don't know too much about it. It's kind of like the mythical visa. But other visas include the entertainment visa. Entertainment visa would be something with a modeling agency. For example, if you have a modeling agency, your modeling agency might be willing to sponsor your visa to Japan for you. Although I have noticed that in the UK, for some reason, a lot of the modeling agencies cater more towards China, Thailand, Canada, Spain, but not Japan. Like, Japan is a separate entity completely. And then there's of course the spouse visa, but I would not recommend anybody gets married to get a visa because that would be a terrible idea and will probably lead to a very, very unhappy life. So I think I'm gonna stop here because I feel like this video is so long already. If you want to know more about the whole visa process information, I've left some links below in the description box. And please let me know if you have any questions in the comments. I will do my best to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope this video was even a little bit helpful to you. If it was, please don't forget to leave me a like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!